Hello, we're here at the Morningstar Investment Conference. I'm joined by John Ameriks, economist and head of research for Vanguard. John, thanks for joining us.
Nice to be here.
One of the old reliable rules of thumb you could always count on when it came to retirement planning was that you can count on withdrawing 4% of your savings every year, adjusted for inflation, and have a really good chance of not running out of money. Can you still count on that in this environment?
Well, I think it's a great rule of thumb. That's what it was always intended for, was to try to help people figure out, well, what's a reasonable rate of withdrawal in retirement. And you know, all the simulation studies that were done around that always came up with some realm of possibility in terms of what the probability was of success. So it was never guaranteed. But we still think it's a reasonable starting point for most people when they get to retirement in terms of thinking about what they can get from a lump sum of assets. And you know, it works for both a withdrawal rule, as you're talking about, and also even when you're thinking about other types of arrangements, that single-digit percentage figure is the right area for people to be thinking about in retirement.
Other types of arrangements? What do you mean?
Like an annuity or some other type of payout. I mean, if you go now to an insurer and you look at an immediate annuity or some other type of income form, and you look at something that's got some inflation protection to it, probably a spousal benefit for most people, you're going to get payouts that are in that realm of sort of 4 to 6%. And so, again, as a rule of thumb, we think it has merit kind of regardless of the environment. Now, obviously, when you go through what we've just been through, there's going to be some challenges. And we got an awful lot of people who are implementing that rule that actually want to behave a little differently in the wake of that environment. They actually want to cut back a little bit more rather than adhere strictly to the rule that you're talking about.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. If you saw your portfolio decline by 50% in 2008, maybe you didn't want to get 4% of what it was before, year after year. You might reach that conclusion.
You're exactly onto something, that it was a sort of a planning rule and not something that people did in practice too much. In practice, what the asset levels were always influenced how much money people would throw.
Sure, so people were realistic.
Yeah.
The government has asked for people to comment, asked for people like you to comment on whether annuities ought to be included in 401ks as a withdrawal option. Is that a good idea?
Well, I think the thing you're referring to is the RFI that went out from the Department of Labor on lifetime income. So, actually, there was a lot of language in the RFI that was related to annuities, but we take a much broader interpretation of what they were asking about, which were what types of solutions are appropriate for somebody who's trying to make their assets fund their retirement over a long period of time. So there was some focus on annuities, and we think for people who need more of a guaranteed floor than they're getting from Social Security or a pension. A lot of people still retiring with pensions. An annuity can make some sense to kind of top that up. But we're also pretty realistic that in general, the vast majority of people when they get to retirement are pursuing some kind of strategic, systematic withdrawal strategy, taking money out. And a lot of people put off withdrawing from their 401k assets until they hit 70 and a half, which is when the government's formal rule kicks in and people start doing required minimum distributions.
People don't need to withdraw from their 401k before 70 and a half?
Well, what's interesting is there's a lot of dynamics there. There may be a lot of people who do need to hit that money right away, but with Social Security, with a pension, with maybe a spouse, and in some cases that's still younger and still working, there are other forms of income that people are relying on until they get to 70 and a half. So we don't see a lot of withdrawal activity up until that age on the retirement side. And then we do see a big jump as people have to follow that rule and take money out of their IRAs.
Is there a rule that you ought to follow if you have a choice about the order in which you should withdraw money from your assets? You should put off the tax-deferred assets like 401ks and IRAs until last?
I think you basically hit the headline right up front, and that's what we would tell people in general. And this is a very individual specific issue, and one of the areas where some planning advice can be very helpful to individuals. But if you're looking for a rule of thumb, a place to start, exactly what you said is correct. We want to keep people in their deferred assets as long as possible and use the money that you're already being taxed on. If you've been able to, if you're one of the few that have been able to accumulate any assets outside of an IRA or 401k, withdraw from those first, and then sooner or later you're going to hit 70 and a half, you're going to have to start taking some out. And if you need to top up those withdrawals, then they come out of the IRA second.
All right, great. John, thanks very much. Thanks for being here.
It's nice to see you.
And thanks for watching.